Hello, my friends, and welcome to Elevenses with Lisa. I am Lisa Louise Cooke. Hey, grab your favorite cuppa because you're going to settle in for a delightful hour with one of Genealogy's favorite fiction writers, Nathan Dylan Goodwin. Now, Nathan's a native of the famed battle town of Hastings, England, and he has a degree in radio, film, and television. He's got a master's in creative writing. And after publishing a couple of nonfiction books, he turned to fiction, and he brought us the beloved forensic genealogist Mort Ferrier in a very popular series of books that includes The Lost Ancestor, Hiding the Past, and The Asylum. In his newest book, which is The Chester Creek Murders, he introduces us to Maddie, Madison Scott Barnhart, and she works for a company called Venator. And it's a company that uses cutting-edge investigative genetic genealogy to profile perpetrators solely from DNA evidence. Help me welcome Nathan Dylan Goodwin. I'm just so happy that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us. You're out in England. Have you got your favorite cuppa with you?
I have, yes, my little Cath Kidston one. Nice cup
Oh,
of tea.
it's good for the end of a winter. It's got the chilly penguins. I'm actually using a cup that I picked up the last time, I think. I don't remember if we crossed paths at Roots Tech a year ago, a week ago.
Yes.
We did in person because the trip that was really on my mind was just prior to that, we both spoke at the Genealogy show in Birmingham, England. And that was the trip that I went and toured a lot of the houses. I think this is Chatsworth.
Oh, lovely.
Yes, we had a wonderful, wonderful time. And it was so good to see you there. How have you been, my friend?
Yes, good, thank you. Yes, I'm in desperate need of a haircut. I can only apologise for that. Yes, we're coping with lockdown. The schools went back on Monday, so I've got a bit more writing time now that homeschooling is finished. But yes, apart from that, I'm looking forward to my vaccine, and yeah, it's okay.
Wow, good. So the kids are going back to school.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, they've been back here for a while here in Texas, and we're finally getting that happening around the country. So that's always really good news. So I just want to jump in and talk with you about the book. Congratulations on another new book. I don't know how you put them out so quickly. How do you do that? And you've had all this craziness going on for the last year.
Yeah. I suppose it's because I just love doing it. I really love it. So yeah, it's been a challenging year, I have to say. But I started this book actually this time last year, just after I got back from Roots Tech. And then when the lockdown happened, I paused on the Chester Creek murders and just put it to one side and then did Mort in lockdown. So I kind of had a little break and then came back to it. So yeah, I think, it's just, I love it so much.
Well, I'm kind of curious. Are you one of those crime podcast junkies? That's the big craze now, is everybody's listening to these crime stories on podcasts. Are you one of those?
I have to say, I've been listening to quite a few, yes, and I'm interested in them anyway, but I do then think, that's a good idea, and pick up some points for future books potentially, yeah. So I am enjoying some, yes.
Well, this one, this is a little bit of a departure in that you really get inside the head of the criminal, which is kind of, tell us about that. Is that hard to write in that kind of detail about the way a criminal thinks?
It is. It's very hard because I haven't actually committed murder myself just yet. So
that's not part of your research, huh?
No, I don't go that far. Yeah, it is difficult actually because you're kind of having to. It's just something that's so out of. I think that's why it's so interesting. It's so out of normality, isn't it? And I'm trying to think what makes these people do this and behave in this way. And yeah, it's quite tricky to get inside the killer's head. I didn't do it too much. The chapters where it's with the serial killer, it's kind of, they're quite short, and I have had some people read it saying, it's sometimes a bit too much, but I tried not to go too far there, because really the book's about trying to solve the crime rather than the actual crime itself. So I don't go into the actual murders themselves. It's kind of seeing the killer just afterwards, and then later on in the book as well.
Well, I suppose though it's key. You have to do it to a certain extent. Otherwise, it really doesn't drive home the point as to why this work is so critical that's being done. And the new technology that, like DNA, that's being used to solve cold cases. I'd love to take a step back and talk about how you get ready to write a book like this. I mean, I want to talk about writing in general, but first, I mean, there's a lot of research that goes into this, isn't there?
Yeah, it's the same with any of my books. If I get the research right, then the actual writing process is much smoother and simpler. So I always spend kind of up to 3 months on the research side of things. So the research for this one came about, it must have been 2 years ago now, when I was in Salt Lake City, actually. And it was just after the Golden State Killer had been caught using this technology. And I thought it'd be really interesting to write a book using that, that kind of a fictionalized version of that. And I thought, what better place to set the team than in Salt Lake City, especially as it's somewhere, I go quite regularly. So that's where the team are based, but the crimes, they can take place all over the US. And so, I did lots of location-based research whilst out there, and obviously had to go and explore lots of cafes and restaurants and things like that, and had to go skiing in Park City to make sure that was accurate. And then I did a lot of work on the DNA side of things, because they're using this investigative genetic genealogy to solve the crime. So that needed to be right, really right. So I did lots of work on my own DNA, and I have already helped in the past 3 adoptees find birth parents. And the principle really is quite similar, in that you don't have this, you have the DNA, you don't know anything about the parents, and you've got to build trees from it. So I did quite a bit of that. And then also I took a course on genetic genealogy, and basically it's a course it's really offered to law enforcement so that they can kind of get a better understanding of this technology and to start to use it in-house rather than have to use these companies. So and finally I spoke to Barbara Ray-Venter, who was one of the principal genealogists who solved the Golden State case. And so I spoke to her and kind of put her loads and loads of questions about, well, how did you do and what did you, and it's such a new thing that actually you're kind of free to really do what I want. I was saying, do people work? Do you work by yourself, or do you work as a team? And is it remote, or are you in one office? And she was kind of like, well, some people are by themselves, some people are working in an office, and so do it as you please, really. So yeah, there's lots of research. I really needed to get all that correct, so that it would stand up as a real methodology, really.
Well, let's break a little bit of that down. Now, you sent me some pictures. I'm putting up one of them on the screen, and it looks like you're at your happy place at the Family History Library. That's a tough place to do research. What a hard job you have. I mean, but you did it for us anyway, didn't you?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was kind of, this is the thing. A lot of it is research for the book, but a lot of it's actually just my personal, I want to do it for myself anyway. So having that opportunity to, whilst out at Roots Tech, to sell the books and everything, I thought, I'm going to go to the Family History Library, yes, for research for the book, but also a bit of stuff, time for myself. And cause it's funny, because living in Kent, if I want to look at records, say for my Buckinghamshire ancestors, for example, it was easier to do it out there than it would be for me, to have to go to Buckinghamshire. So yeah, I did a bit of my own research and a bit of work for the book.
Isn't that interesting? You have to coming to the US, you actually have greater access to a lot of the stuff that you really need.
Yeah.
Wow. Now here's another picture. Now, this looks like fun. You have the bike, or I guess, are these scooters? They have these down all over the streets in Salt Lake City, don't they?
Yes, yeah. They're just, I think the first year I went out, I saw these scooters just lying around on the pavement. So I was thinking, why has someone left them, just dumped them and walked away? And then the second year I kind of looked into it a bit more, and then found that you could actually hire them. And, you hire them for as long as you need, and then you literally just leave them somewhere. And then people just pick them up. And so I rented one for an afternoon and buzzed around the city, and it was good fun. But you're supposed to not go on the pavement; you're supposed to go stay on the roads, and I don't know, it was quite dangerous.
Yeah.
So I was kind of going slowly on the pavement if I had nobody around, and then buzz onto the road a bit. But it was good fun. Yeah.
Well, my husband Bill started reading your book too, and he looks at me and goes, wow, he's really nailed Salt Lake City. I mean, that's what it feels like. You really had it. And then that really adds so much to the story as you help immerse all of us, is you've done that homework so you can really bring us along and describe it. And if you haven't had the opportunity to go to Salt Lake City and the Family History Library, boy, you sure feel like you've been there. And there's the Kearns building, and you've placed the company Venator there. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, we were looking around and trying to find somewhere that would be suitable. And that building, with its history and the fact that it was obviously right on Main Street in the city centre, it just looked really perfect. And I couldn't really tell what the building was used for. And so I kind of opened the door and just looked inside, and there were some elevators and the stairs. And so I just started wandering around and looking. And I did get a security guard kind of looking at me strangely, because I was going down into the basement, into the garage there. And he was kind of like, what are you doing? I'm like, just looking, thanks. And just, as if I had some right to be there, And I thought, yeah, this is a good building, because each floor has got different companies on it. So it's perfectly feasible that they could have the top floor there and to go about their business. So, yeah, it's a good building.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And the security guard thinks you're casing the joint, right? For your own activities there. So it was interesting. It kind of did read a little bit like insider baseball in terms of, that's a term, I don't know if you do that in England, but we say that in the US. Insider baseball is, having a real firsthand knowledge kind of behind the scenes. And you bring that both to the criminal cold case side as well as the DNA. And just for anybody who isn't by chance, I don't know if there's anybody who's not familiar with the Golden State Killer case, but that was out in California. And I lived out there. I lived in Modesto, the town where he first started. And I remember as a kid, that was a big deal. I mean, we all heard about these different crimes, and it was decades. And eventually they discovered that by putting, having DNA from one of those crime scenes and putting that into many of the genealogy databases, of course, they were able to build out trees to finally trace down to catch up with him. You said that you interviewed Barbara, and I'd love to have you talk a little bit more about what was that like, because you really did get a firsthand kind of behind the scenes look that you've shared a lot in the book, but it must have been fascinating to talk to her about that work.
Yes, it really was. She was obviously very, very knowledgeable and very humble as well. She wasn't really, I kind of had to dig a bit with my questioning, about what I wanted. And I think at first she was like, why are you asking me all these questions? And I was trying to say, I'm writing a book that's going to be, based on that. So yeah, I was more asking about the actual methodology of things. And I was saying, so questions like, how do you get the DNA? Is it that law enforcement passes it to you and you then give it to the company, or do they go straight to the company? And so she was talking about how basically through family tree DNA, the law enforcement, they send the sample to be tested at family tree DNA. And she was telling me all the pricing, like it's $700 just for the autosomal results. But if you want the Y test as well, then it goes up to $1,000. And then the company is then given the results as anybody else's. They like login details, and so they log in and they've got access to details. And
are those prices because it's for this type of work?
Yes, because it's specifically for law enforcement.
Okay.
And so she was telling me like the turnaround time and that kind of thing, and the fact that once it's on Family Tree DNA, they can then download that from there to put it onto GEDmatch. I think there was a cheaper price as if they went straight to GEDmatch, but then that's generally the way it was done. And she was telling me about, she would take on any case, no matter how low the centimorgan matches were. So she has lots and lots of cases that at the moment are just sitting sort of waiting because they're a bit too complicated at the moment. It's just, the closest match is just too small. So it's kind of waiting for a bigger match to come in or a bit more time to focus on that. So I think she said she had something like 11 cases on the go at any one time that she's working on. And she does free pro bono work for the Centre for Missing and Exploited Children, where they've got remains of children who they don't know who they are, and so she does work for them. And so I pulled a lot of that into the research. So it was really fascinating speaking to her, because it would just added that authenticity to the process, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine knowing that autosomal goes back, 6 generations. I mean, if you had a 5-generation match, that would be a bear to try to build out a tree all the way coming forward. Yeah. Almost impossible. So they're really looking for those closest 1 level, 2 level type matches, right?
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
But she won't turn them down if they're too far. She'll just kind of have to just sit on it and just tells them it's just have to wait for a bit. So hopefully they'll get there in the end.
One of the things that you mentioned in the book was that, and I was going to ask you, is this true? 1% of criminal cold cases are solved in the U.S.?
Yes, that is true. Very, very sad. But I mean, I think that's going to start changing, though, because of genetic genealogy, because their success rates are something like 80-something% at the moment. So that's a huge number moving forwards in these various companies. So hopefully, that statistic will start to be a bit more positive, really.
Did you have a chance to talk to criminal detectives in preparation for this book? I'd be interested to know about that too.
Yeah, so I spoke to, there's about 3 that I was speaking to in different parts of the US. It's quite interesting, actually, how they differ in their approaches. And so, for example, there's a scene at the end of the book. I can't give too much away, but I don't know how to say it without giving it away, but there's a scene basically where there's the police involved in trying to catch somebody, and one detective said, absolutely, that would not happen, you wouldn't do that. And another detective said, oh yes, that's totally plausible, and yes, we've done that. So I did actually use it in the book. And the scenes at the very beginning when Clayton Tyler, the detective, he's in his basement in the police department building, and he's looking at all the cold cases they've got there, and he's choosing which one to pick. But all of that information about the public disclosure records and the fact that they have to keep reviewing their cold cases, because otherwise journalists can ask for information about them. All of that basically came from a detective, and that's all true, that information. So
wow,
it's very fascinating. Because it's something, there's no way on earth I would have known that or been able to research that. So they have these PDRs, they're called. So journalists can write to any police department and say, we'd like information on all of your cold, inactive cases. So the way they get around that is to then open them up again and review them. And if there's a chance of them being solved, then they'll give it a high solvability, and they'll then try to bring some fresh evidence to this and try and solve it. And so
that's fascinating, because I watch a lot of true crime. I don't listen to the podcast as much since I do a podcast. I watch a lot of the true crime television shows. They have a whole channel for that here in the US. You probably get it in the UK. But I often wondered, they say, oh, we opened this case or that case. It was 35 years old. And you were like, what prompted you to do that? But you've just really given an insider look to that, because it's that putting it in active status so that you don't have to necessarily answer a whole bunch of questions about it to the press.
I mean, he did say, it's the reason they don't do it to stop the journalists having access. They just think that if a journalist starts running a story about it, there's less chance of it actually being solved, because now it's all over Netflix, or it's in a newspaper or whatever. So they do have to review them. So all of that information about the cold cases and the kind of the numbers they go back to 1900 in their vaults, the date wise, and so all of that information I got from real US detectives.
And I think that's probably a little bit of why the Golden State Killer case came to prominence and got worked as hard as it did, because there was a writer who was absolutely obsessed with the case and kept writing about it and kept bringing it up and gave it that kind of exposure. Well, it's interesting. You have produced a lot of books, and you talked about going to the Family History Library and getting a chance to do some of your own research too. Do you get to do much of your own genealogy research these days?
Not as much as I would like. I try to do a little bit every week if I can do. Yeah. I would love to just sit down. I'm down in my cabin now, and this is where I do my writing, down the bottom of the garden. And I would love to just come down and sit here and do my family tree. And it does get very tempting, especially as I have to use all these databases for the Morton books and for the Maddie books. So I'm constantly on Ancestry and Find My Past and My Heritage and Family Tree, and Family Search. I'm constantly on them. I'm thinking, oh, I've got a message. Let me just look at what that is. And then you know what it's like. You go down a rabbit hole and suddenly you're... So yes, I do my own work quite regularly. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of a balance, isn't it? I have the same issue here with doing this show, is that it's so easy to push mine aside because I'm trying to juggle all these other things. And yet that research is essential to staying abreast of what's going on and the newest things, and being able to bring challenges I'm facing, I know, to people who are watching who are probably having the same challenges. And you're bringing, fascinating stories, and you weave genealogical research into all of these books. I got emails from people saying, oh my gosh, Nathan helped me solve something, or Nathan made me aware of DNA. And now I'm finding out, who my grandmother was. And it's just been amazing the way you can touch lives with that kind of work. Do you get that kind of feedback from your readers?
I do, yes. I get a lot of that, which is really, really lovely. And that's why I'm really keen and careful to get that research right, so that if I'm saying, obviously the content of a lot of the records are fictionalised to suit the story, but I try to really make sure that the records that Morton is using, or Maddie is using in this case, that they're real, and that if I say they're online, then they're online, or if I say you have to go to a library, that's where you have to go for them. And I do get very frequent messages and emails from people saying, that it's opened up a new area of research and they found this person because of the book. So it's really good to hear.
Well, I put it out on Instagram and Facebook that we were doing this interview, and heard from lots of people. Jasmine, she goes by Jasmine Pie 1 on Instagram. She says, I, capital letters, love his books. Thank you for writing such interesting and thoughtful commentaries on genealogy and crime. And I had a question from a listener I'd love to ask you about here. Let me pull this up. So Mr. Gene 61 says, I've loved Morton's stories and his genealogical methodology. Morton Ferrier, right? So do you have a new adventure planned for him? I bet you get that question a lot.
I do, yeah. As soon as I finish one, it's like, when's the next one? And now I get people saying, I want the next Maddie, but I want the next Morton, so just hurry up and get on with it. Yes, I do. I'm writing it right now. I'm about halfway through, and every third book, so The Orange Lilies, The Missing Man, and this one I'm writing now, they're slightly shorter in length, which means it will be out sooner. But they're more focused on Morton's backstory and his life. So that's the one I'm working on right now. And I'm hoping, because I'm about halfway there and getting through it quite quickly, hoping it'll be out kind of autumn time. But don't hold me to that, because I'm terrible at doing that. It'll be out at Christmas, and it's not out at Christmas. So it'll be out sometime this year anyway.
I remember you talking in Birmingham about the origins of Morton and of your writing. I'd love to have you share with our viewers kind of how, not only how you got started in this kind of writing, but also how Morton came to be and what almost happened to him.
So I started, as you said, with non-fiction writing, first of all, and I really loved the writing process. And so on the back of that, I did a master's degree in creative writing. And I think it was very early on in the course, and I started to think about doing a detective book, but where the detective is a genealogist and has to solve a crime in the past, but using genealogy. And so that's kind of where Morton first came from. And I kept writing it, and it was at the time when genealogy was really getting more and more popular, and Who Do You Think You Are was on telly and that kind of thing. And my classmates were very supportive of it and very positive, and they said, keep writing. So the course was 2 years part-time, and so I just kept writing more and more and more and more of it. And actually, on the book that I had, it wasn't really a book by the time, it wasn't finished, but by the time the course finished, I was thinking it would be just a one-off kind of standalone project. And I actually had Morton, I was going to kill him off. And I remember some of the people in the course saying, well, don't do that, just in case, like, you know, it could become a series. And I think as well, people over the years have said, like, his and Juliet's relationship has got a lot closer, and some people have read just Hide in the Past and said, oh, she's not very nice to him. And I think it's because I thought he was going to die. It was a one-off. It didn't really matter what their relationship was, you know. So I'm very glad, obviously, that I didn't kill him off. And but I put the book to one side, and I didn't actually try to get it published. That was in 2009. I finished the degree, and I then just went into becoming a primary school teacher, as you do, and just didn't think too much of it. And then I read Steve Robinson's first book, which is another genealogical crime mystery. It's the first one I'd ever read, and I thought, wow, there's a market here for this. This is good. I'll get Hide in the Past out and finish it basically and edit it. And so I used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning before doing a day's teaching, and I would do an hour of and that was really tough, I have to say. You know, I am a morning person, but I'm not at 5 o'clock in the morning in the cold and the dark in winter, putting my dressing gown on and going in and just trying to, you know. So, but I did it and finished the book, and yeah, it's published in 2013, and well, I haven't looked back really.
Oh, well, we're all very glad that you didn't kill off Morton Ferrier, because he went on to have many books. And of course, I really have always said, this isn't just my opinion, that everything's about relationships. If it's business, if it's school, if it's writing, if it's making a video, whatever, it's all about the relationships. And the relationships that you write about help people connect with those characters and therefore connect with your book. I think, you know, a really fascinating crime story is great, but not if I don't care about anybody who's involved. And so you've got Madison, who's a lead character in the Chester Creek murders, and she has her own issues as well. Do you give a lot of thought to the relationships or just the connection of the audience with these characters while you're also trying to put together these complicated mysteries? Yeah,
that is really important, because I think the reader really needs to at least empathize. Obviously, that's why another reason I kept the serial killer chapters quite short, because I'm not expecting someone to go, oh, he's nice, after all, he's killed a few women, but apart from that, he's a lovely guy. I'm not expecting that. So it's very important for the rest of the book then that people do care about Maddie and her. She's got this small team that she's got with the three other main characters. That they at least, even if they think they don't particularly like her, they at least empathise with her and get her situation, understand her. But yeah, the idea is that a reader will like her and the rest of the team as well. They've all got their, foibles and flaws, but hopefully people will like them. And I do spend, again, time in that research period trying to figure out the family situations and the relationships, and because they've got to be believable people as well, so you can sort of relate to them and to understand them better. Is also helpful with the writing, how they're going to deal with situations that they're facing. So yeah, I do. That's very important.
I bet it's a lot like acting. I did a lot of acting in my younger years, and you had to know the backstory, even if it's never going to come up in the play or whatever it is you're doing. You have to kind of know so that you get how they're going to respond. And I imagine that there are backstories to Clayton and to Madison that you probably have to kind of plan out. And how far in advance? Do you plan multiple books in advance?
I do. So with the Maddie and her team, so I've already, as I was writing that book, I was thinking of the next book, and so I've already got the ideas. I know very much. I could pretty well start it, today if I want to. With Morton, I usually am about 2 or 3 books in advance. So I'm currently halfway through book 9, but I've got a very good idea and his kind of subplot about his own family life for 10 and 11, and kind of a vague idea for 12. So yeah, but it's good to have that as well, because then as I'm writing and I come across records or things in my own research, and I think, oh, that would work for that book in, another 2 years' time. It gives me time to then consider these things a bit more and add to them, rather than blank page and what am I writing.
Now, do you fashion some of these, maybe not the character, but the personalities of the different characters? Do you fashion them after people that you know? Is there a Nathan somewhere in one of these books?
Well, Morton started that way, and as a bit of me, but my tutor on the creative writing course, he said, don't base a character on you, because actually you'll make them not very nice, because you don't want people to think, oh, they're such a nice character and they're based on you, and so you'll then go the opposite way, and you'll make them not very nice, because you'll think, I don't want people to think that I'm that nice. And he just said, don't do that. And so I'm glad he said it, because I listened and then kind of separated him. So he's now just like a very good friend, or like a brother. I know exactly what he's thinking and how he'll behave. And he drives the car I want, and he lives in the house I want. But apart from that, he's not. So other characters, I see the person, Maddie's physical appearance was actually based on somebody. I was at a National Trust property called Sissinghurst a few years back, when the idea was fermenting in my brain, and I hadn't started writing it. And I just saw this lady, and she just had she had a trilby hat on, and she was probably in her mid-40s, and she had short blonde hair, and she just struck me. She just looked quite striking, and I thought, she looks like I think Maddie would look, with these kind of ripped jeans, and kind of don't really care doesn't care what she looks like, and a bit fierce. And I thought, yeah, that's Maddie. So yeah, I pick bits of people I see, but there's nobody that a character is specifically based on, apart from Miss Latimer, the archivist in the Morton books, who's always a bit mean to him. She's a real person.
Interesting. So this other gal was walking around. She doesn't know she's walking around in a book as Maddie.
No. I surreptitiously took a photo of her, but she doesn't know.
Oh, fun. Oh, how fun. Now, one of our longtime viewers here at Elevenses with Lisa, Amy, she left a comment. She says, I would like to know, how can we best integrate a feeling of compelling mystery into our own family history writing? And I know a lot of people are watching. They want to write too, but they do want to make it interesting. And I heard from many people that they actually have mysteries in their writing. Do you have any advice where, they can stick to the truth, but they can make it a little more compelling, particularly for non-genealogists in their family who normally hear genealogy and they go running for the hills, but we want to write something that will, as Amy says, kind of make them feel compelled to want to continue to read?
I guess if you're wanting to not fictionalize, you want to tell a real story of your real ancestors. The way I would go about it would be to have all your sources and things, but really push them to the back as end notes. So I think sometimes with genealogy, we have a tendency to say this person was born on the 17th of March, 1652, and he was baptized in this church, and on this census, and it gets quite, okay, it's a bit boring, but you need those sources, obviously. So I would say, go for the thing that you think is really interesting about this person that you've got, or this part of your tree, and then really try and sort of jazz that up without making it fictionalized, obviously, and then put the boring, the dry bits, put them into end notes, so that if people want to know, well, how do you know that they were born on this date? Put that as an end note, and then try and look into their lives a bit more around it. So look at newspapers and what's going on at the time period, and look at what their kind of was happening around them in history, and then find that hook, whatever it is that you've got, that you're going to. If it's a murder or something, then obviously that's quite a big thing, and perhaps start with a sort of a cliffhanger moment. Introduce a paragraph of this person committed murder or was murdered. read on to find out kind of thing, and then you can say where they were born and how they came in to be in those circumstances. It's a tricky one because you don't want to go into the realms of fiction and start to make things up because you don't know what they said or whatever. But that would be my advice there.
And it seems like it would be fair to, in that kind of writing, if you have a good sense of what you think might have happened or how that person might have, you can say it, but we could say it within, this is our, I tend to envision it this way, or I can't help but think, right? Couldn't we give some of that maybe, but just couch it in the idea that this is just my opinion, but one can't help but wonder.
I think as long as you need to make sure you understand who your audience is going to be, and with to make sure you're saying this isn't trying to be exactly completely what was said. If you're upfront about that, then I think you can definitely do that because why not? It makes it much more fun, doesn't it, for the reader? I think.
Well, and that's a really good point, is knowing your audience. I tend to teach a lot about creating short little family history videos, which is really storytelling just in a visual format. And of course, I think the number one thing we can do is do it for our audience, not for us. I mean, for us, for the genealogist, is all that data that you were talking about. But for the other audience, the family, it's got to be something else. I know you spend time with your audience, don't you, like on social media? And how much do you keep the audience in the forefront of your mind as you're writing?
It's a tricky one because I know what the audience are looking for, and so I kind of I know that they're asking for, they want obviously the genealogical crime to be going on in the middle of it. They also want to see Morton at home with Juliet and the family, and so I do have it in mind, but I try to just tell the story that I want to tell. And I mean, when I wrote the Chester Creek murders, obviously I didn't have an audience in mind because I didn't know who would. Obviously, I hoped that my regular readers would read that one too. But it being such a different book and quite unique, I don't think anybody else has done anything along those lines yet. So it's very difficult to. So it's a bit of a balance really, having it in mind what they would want to see, and then putting my own thing down that I know I would like to tell. Yeah, it's a tricky one.
You can't always deliver exactly what they're looking for, even if they desperately want it, because then it's too predictable. Which kind of brings me to, where do you get ideas? I know for a genealogist, of course, one of the challenges is just looking through this whole tree and deciding where to start. You probably have a lot of ideas coming at you. How do you pick one? What do you look for in an idea or a new technology or a new strategy that you're hearing about that people are using in genealogy, and you say, that's something I want to write about?
It's usually something that makes me interested. That's what it is. I think, because I've been doing my family tree since I was 12, and so I know kind of, I've dealt with lots and lots of research over that time, and if something now strikes me as, that's an interesting story, then I think that's therefore very likely to make other people also interested. So, for example, with the Chester Creek murders, obviously it was the capture of the Golden State killing, and I thought, wow, that's huge. This has never happened before, that someone's been caught using DNA and using genealogy. So that was obviously a very big catalyst for that book. But the books in the Morton series, they tend to be things that I come across, and it can be doing my own family tree research, it can be on the news, all kinds of things. So the Sterling affair, the most recent Morton book, that was just from an email from the British National Archives. And it was basically that there was a release of new spy documents, because they obviously closed for a very long time for obvious reasons. And I thought, that would be a really good book, because it's very much, suited to this genre. Somebody who's a spy and pretending to be someone they're not and going under a false name. And so I thought, that would be really interesting. I started to look then at these new records that were released from MI5 and MI6, and started to get an idea that perhaps if someone pretended to be someone they weren't, and Morton had some DNA that he could work with and try to work out who they really were and the story behind behind their spying. Yes, it really can come from anywhere and everywhere. And the story of the Spyglass file, for example, that was very, very loosely based on my grandmother's story, because she gave birth to an illegitimate child in the Second World War. And that's the kind of the premise of the Spyglass file. So yeah, it's really, really anywhere and everywhere. So I've got a notes file on my phone. So if I'm out and about and something occurs to me, then I'll put it in the file. But if it's like a news story or something, then I've got that a big file on my computer as well. So I've got millions of ideas. Lots of them don't see the light of day because I can't quite build a story around it, because it's got to be more than just an interesting story by itself. I've got to be able to make a whole book out of that. So yeah, anywhere and everywhere is a short answer to that.
It strikes me as you're talking about this, Nathan, that you're getting ideas, and I see how quickly the books come out. They're very thorough. You do your research. I get the sense you're just one of these people who, and it's a rare quality, I think, who doesn't wait. Like, you seem to jump, and when you see something, you trust yourself enough to say, I got to run with that, and I got to do it now, because there could be 10 more books coming on this, I would imagine, if you waited 5 years. I know I'm a little bit like that as things are coming, it's like, it needs to happen now. And you have the discipline to get up every morning and to sit down and to write. Is that just inborn, or did you train yourself to be more diligent and persistent about those things that mattered to you, that you wanted to accomplish, like writing books?
It's a good question. I don't know. I've never had it before now that there's something it absolutely is. I never ever have a Sunday night, I've got to go to work tomorrow. I never have that. I have the opposite. If I don't work, because I'm doing other things, decorating or, on holiday or something, I'm thinking I need to get back to my writing. I want to do this. But it has grown, and I do trust myself much more now. I think when I was first writing, I kind of needed to know, where's this going to go? And I need to know exactly the whole structure. But now I kind of
safety, right?
Yeah, exactly. Whereas now I kind of trust myself. And that's why I paused on, even though I was desperate to get the Chester Creek murders written, I paused when the coronavirus hit. And I thought, this is my one opportunity to talk about Morton in lockdown and what he's doing. And I wanted to do, and I thought, I'm going to do something completely different as well. And so I came up with a web-based interactive story. And it's kind of like a choose your own adventure. So it's on my website, and you read a section of text of story, and then you have to say what Morton's going to do next at each point, which it was a bit of a nightmare to plot that, because it was huge. For every piece of text, you're given 2 or 3 choices. And
it's a cool idea.
Yeah, and it's the first opportunity that I've had to put hyperlinks into real documents and real photos, and so I really thought, I've just got to do this. I can't look back in a couple of years. I mean, I have to say, I thought the pandemic would be over much sooner. Not that we would still be sitting in it a year later, but I thought, this is my one chance to do something. And so, yeah, I just trusted myself and went with it and did it. But it's kind of I've got more disciplined, but not in a forced way. Just is, I want to get up and I want to get writing, and so I just get on with it, purely because I just love doing it.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Well, I so appreciate having you here today, and thank you so much for your patience as we kind of work through all the technical things. I know a lot of the things that we've been talking about, several of your past books. We've had you on the Genealogy Gems podcast and featured you in the book club. And so I'm going to put some links in the show notes for this episode so everybody can come and kind of get up to speed with some of those books if by chance they miss them. And of course, a link over to your website. It's just NathanDylanGoodwin.com, correct?
That's right. Yes.
Awesome. So you said that currently, tell us again what your current project is. What will we see next from Nathan?
So Morton 9, hopefully about autumn time. Yeah, you'll have Morton out, and then probably it will be then back onto Maddie again. I think.
Excellent. Well, again, right now, this is the book. It's The Chester Creek Murders, and I'm going to have a link also in the show notes so that you can grab a copy of that. We always appreciate when you guys use our links, which kind of helps support this free show and makes it all possible. Nathan, it's such a joy to talk to you. And, next time we got to do this in person. I hope it's very soon.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much to Nathan for joining us here at Elevenses with Lisa. Of course, we're going to have show notes for you at genealogygems.com/Elevenses, and we'll have a link down in the video description on our YouTube channel for this video. And I so appreciate everybody's patience with the fact that we had some technical difficulties. I wanted to do this all live with all of you so we could have the chat going. And it just didn't come together. I got up this morning and there was a Windows update waiting for me that had already been completed. And I knew that was going to throw something off. And it did, but that's okay. We'd actually already reached out to many of you on Instagram and Facebook, and I got some of your questions, so we were able to incorporate some of those. And I think for upcoming interviews, that might be a really great way to go, so we can kind of get some of those ahead of time and make sure that we can do the rest of the show together live. So, hey, we're a family here. Thank you so much for being so patient with me and for sharing your comments, your questions. Do be sure and follow me on both Instagram at Genealogy Gems Podcast and Facebook at Genealogy Gems Podcast. That's a wonderful place to be able to talk with each other. You can share your questions and comments. We'd love to hear those. You're a big part of what makes this show very, very special. So thank you. So thank you so much for watching, my friends. Have a wonderful week with those you love. I'll talk to you soon.